Much first for inviting me to this conference. It'll be very interesting to participate, and also already to hear your experiences here in Estonia. I had a PowerPoint presentation that I sent over. Is it possible to get that up on the screen? Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Right. So I'll start off by saying a little bit about the background and the situation in Norway before I say something about the trials that we have had and the results of them. And finally, I'll say a little bit about the current political situation in Norway and sort of where we stand at the moment on the topic of voting and lowering the voting age at 16. So, like I said, a little bit of background. This year marks the 40th anniversary of suffrage for 18-year-olds in Norway. So it's, in a sense, it feels like it's time to again discuss whether we should be lowering the voting age at the moment, knowing that if we look back those 40 years, many of the same questions about lowering the voting age were also posed back then. Questions like, are the 18-year-olds mature enough? Will they be affected by their parents? How will this affect democracy and so forth? And obviously we know now, and we knew actually quite right away, that we had nothing to worry about when it came to lowering the voting age for 18-year-olds. And I'm sure most countries have experienced that. Additionally, in Norway, we've had mock elections at schools for almost 30 years now. And I think that's an important point to say, because we've already touched upon it earlier today, the importance of civic education, importance of learning about democracy, not just about, the formal, how many members are there in parliament type, but also learning to participate actually in democracy, even in school, is very important. So in Norway, we've established this tradition over a long time, and I think there is very little discussion over whether or not these mock elections are a good thing. And the way it works is that during an election campaign, youth representatives from all parties are invited to all of the high schools in Norway, and they partake in a debate. And after the debate, all youth are allowed to partake in the mock elections. An interesting note there is that we see that the mock elections, the results have become more and more similar to the results in the actual elections that are held about a week later. So what we're seeing is that as sort of the mock elections become more and more institutionalized, they also align more and more with the rest of the results align more and more with the results of the actual elections and apparently the opinions held by the rest of the population. However, there is at the moment limited political will to lower the suffrage down to 16, and I'll get into that later. That's kind of the context. And then, of course, as you all know, when we had our first trials in 2011, it was a very special situation in Norway because it happened only a couple of months after the terrorist attacks in Oslo and Utøya. So it was, and that was obviously an attack on youth participation, on a democratic youth party. So it kind of set an unusual setting for the first elections. But what it also meant was that a high number of young people chose to participate in democracy in the months and years following that. So in the months that followed, we had a high increase of young people that became members of various political parties, and we also saw a general increase in the voter turnout for first-time voters, which is important or relevant to remember as I present the results and the trials. So the background for the trials is we had been working for a long time to try and initiate trials because we realized that just saying, well, we want to change the law, we want to lower the voting age, without any type of documentation, without having tried it out on a smaller scale before, would be very, very difficult politically. So what we managed to do was we created a coalition, obviously of ourselves. We are an organization that represents 96 different organizations, represent all of the political youth wings in Norway, from the Progressive Party on the right to the socialist parties on the left. And we got great help from several of the youth parties, from political but non-political actors such as the Children's Ombudsman, and so forth. And because we managed to do that, we kind of managed to lift the topic from something that was left-wing, right-wing, and to something that was more principle. And we could show that liberal parties want this, the environmental party want this, the socialist parties want this. So it was a wide range of topics, and we kind of managed to get away from the very typical, this is a left-wing issue that there is always a danger of falling into. And also we got the support, as you always need, from key members of parliament. We got the support from Untitled Chapter, who was the responsible minister at the time. But she represented a party that was not actually for lowering the voting age, but we managed to create an agreement that, okay, there's nothing wrong in trying. Let's find out. Let's get some data here to see whether or not this could be a good idea. So for both the elections in 2011 and 2015, we managed to get government to have trials with 20 municipalities all over Norway. And they were picked to try and sort of show a wide range of the different municipalities. So you had some municipalities who were small areas on the countryside, very few voters, few inhabitants, and then you had other that were major cities in Norway, and try to get a kind of a whole scape of the Norwegian populace. And the results were, well, they weren't as excellent as apparently they've been here in Estonia, but the expectation was that there would be significantly lower turnout than the population in general. While the turnout proved to be slightly lower, but not as low as expected, and significantly higher than other first-time voters, which is an interesting piece of fact, I find. It also turned out that political preferences were actually quite similar to the rest of the population, because this is an argument that very often comes up, is that you'll have more extreme left, extreme right parties doing better elections because youth in general have more polarized opinions. That wasn't the case in any of the trials. There was also somewhat some uncertainty on whether voting becomes a habit, because that was one of the key questions when academics looked into this, was can we prove that starting out voting at an early age will raise voting turnout in general, because it institutionalizes and creates a habit of voting. And the jury is still out on that one. We don't know that for sure. But what we do know, like I said, is that voter turnout was higher than expected. Another thing that is very relevant here is that there's a great degree of variation on just how much resources each municipality put into mobilizing and put into kind of spreading the message that this year 16-year-olds will be allowed to vote. And that was very well reflected in the turnout. For those municipalities where they did not put that much effort into it, what we see is that voter turnout was fairly low, even compared to what was expected. In those municipalities where the municipality actually spent a lot of resources mobilizing through schools, through network, through municipal agencies, we see that the turnout was actually higher than the average for the rest of the population as well. So what that means is it really matters not just to change the laws and to lower the voting age, but you actually have to follow that up. You have to put some effort into mobilizing. It won't happen by itself. And of course, I think it's relevant because this was the first time it was ever tried, right? So you don't have to mobilize people who already have the right to vote and have had it for 20 or 30 years because they already know that. But because this was the first time effort, you had to put that extra effort also in resources to mobilize. But when municipalities did that, we saw a very good effect. I also want to say a little bit about what we're facing now as the main arguments, because I think it's relevant because different countries have different debates, and the arguments may vary from country to country, and I've seen that today as well. And I think that these are the two major arguments against lowering the voting age in Norway that we face very often. One of them is one that Professor Toots was touching on earlier today. Active suffrage should follow passive suffrage. That means that you should not be allowed to vote if you cannot also be allowed to be voted into an office. Our argument against that is that, well, for most of Norway's history, that hasn't actually been the case. We've changed these laws several times, lowering the age for active suffrage and passive suffrage at different stages, and that is not actually an argument in itself. You might call it a good ideal, but it is not necessary, and there is nothing at least in Norwegian law that says that it has to follow. So there is certainly an opening to say that we can lower the age of active suffrage without lowering the age of passive suffrage. And then the other argument is that active suffrage should follow full independence, and this is an argument I'm sure you're all very well aware of and heard quite often, but these are sort of the two major points. One of the things that we managed to achieve, and that I would say is one of the major takeouts for us, is that we focused a lot on getting proper data, on having good academic grounding on our arguments, so that we managed, for instance, to take out the argument that said that it would be a tremendous job to change this judicially, that from a judicial point of view it would be difficult to change the law. And we looked into that, and we managed to say that no, it's really not that difficult, and our trials showed the same thing. It's actually not that difficult, and there is nothing in the Norwegian judicial system that says that it can't be done. Which leads us to this. Oh, that picture was the wrong way. It leads us to where we are today. It's really, the matter of lowering the voting age in Norway is really a matter of political will. Are we willing to do this? And right now we're unfortunately in a politically locked situation, and even more so because the party that is kind of the key for us with the current political situation entered government in January, which kind of locked everything up because they were the Liberal Party, who had the most will to push this agenda politically, and now they are locked because they're in government with two parties who are not interested, and they kind of have to weigh what they want to focus on. However, we have seen some positives in local referendums because we're going through an administrative reform in Norway as well, and in many instances, municipalities have been given the option to allowing citizens to vote over whether or not they want to be merged with neighboring municipalities. In many cases, municipalities themselves have chosen to give 16-year-olds the opportunity to vote when holding these referendums, and turnout there has been high, and we've also seen that it's been part of mobilizing youth. So there's some positive takeouts there that I think we can build on, and there is also a new commission in place to review the entire election law, which will of course also look at the possibility of lowering the voting age. Unfortunately, that commission won't be done with their work until 31st of December 2019, which leaves us with 1.5 years of not being able to do anything because all politicians will be saying that we want to wait for the Commission to come with their recommendations. So we are at the moment somewhat locked, but we've had good experiences, and I think that if we manage to keep pushing for a change, then we will manage to find those key actors that will change the political will in our direction.